Alright, I'm a little bored due to COVID challenges, so I'm going to give you, it's not so much a how-to video as it is how interesting is this video. A friend of mine suggested that you might be able to get smoother steering from your XC70, if yours is a little bit on the tough side, from just changing out the power steering pumps from the XC70 to the XC90 version. And so sure enough, I was curious enough that I went to the rec yard and checked out an XC90. So outer diameter for, let's say, roughly 14.2 for an XC70. Outer diameter for a XC90 is 13, bang on. And so these two pulleys are definitely different sizes. And I did some math, and it turns out you'll get, I think it's 9% faster RPMs from smaller pulley as compared to the larger XC70 pulley, and that will give you a little bit more pressure into the power steering rack. The only thing to look out for is there are two types of power steering pumps that you'll come across at the rec yard. There's the screw-in type that is good for the XC70 01 through to sometime in 04, and then there is the press-in type, which it's pretty easy to tell the difference. The push-in types actually connect the rigid pipe to the power steering pump through a screw that is located to the side, whereas the thread-in really just you thread it on right through the pipe itself. The thread-ins, as far as I'm concerned, I really don't like them. I wish I had press fit or press in, but anyway, it is what it is. And to upgrade from one to the other, you got to switch the pipes and the rack out. So no thanks. Have done that once. Don't feel like doing it again unless I really need to. So these are the two pumps. If you put them, one right next to the other, if centimeters aren't your thing, you can tell there's a difference. There's a noticeable difference. So let's go outside and see how that all fits. Here we are in the vehicle. Power steering pump sits right here. This is clearly the thread-on type. The upgrade itself is pretty straightforward. Take the auxiliary belt off, reach through the holes in the pulley and remove the 3 bolts that connect the power steering pump, 1, 2, 3, to the engine itself, and disconnect, obviously, unthread the pressure hose, loosen the clamp for the return hose, pull that off. You're going to want to have a receptacle underneath, like a little plastic cup to catch some of the fluid. And I actually got one of those cheap vice grip like pliers from Harbor Freight that pinches this hose shut so that you don't get too much liquid draining all over the place. I just needed a slight top up of fluid when I was done. Now here's the only curveball, and this is what I discovered after a couple of tries. There are 2 different lengths of auxiliary belt available for XC70/XC90, and I couldn't find the second length unless I searched for a 2006 XC70. Prior to that, there was just the single belt, and obviously the second belt is for the smaller pulley. Here's an image of the 2 belts side by side on germanparts.ca for reference. As I was saying, there are 2 belts. The second belt is harder to find, so the code you're looking for, someone on Sweet Speed explained to me, there is a belt with a code that ends in 1841, and then there's a second belt with a code that ends in 1825. And the 4-digit numerical code actually corresponds to the total length of the belt. So obviously the 1825 is shorter than the 1841. Not by much, but just enough to prevent slapping of the tensioner against the side of the engine. Found that out because I didn't replace the belt and then could not for the life of me figure out why why there was now a very distinct clicking noise from the engine. So at first I thought it was the second-hand power steering pump that I got, which is why you see that I now have in total 3 power steering pumps. But when I put the second replacement in, the noise remained, so that's when I got some help from fellow Swede Speed members, and they pointed me in the right direction to get the right size of belt. And when I got that 1825 belt on, the power steering was smooth and silent, so job done. And actually, you know what, it might be in my head, but I think that I get about 9% smoother steering, so you get 9% faster, 9% more RPMs, and you can feel the difference between the feel of the steering with the original pulley and then with the smaller pulley. I should also mention I did install a power steering cooler line, and I've got another video on that. All of the XC90s in the yard that I've come across do have a power steering cooler installed. So it's possible that the smaller pulley generates just enough heat for it to be a little bit more problematic. All that to say, if you are going to go with this upgrade, you probably do want to install a power steering cooler line also. This is the power steering cooler right there, or the power steering cooler line. It basically extends the return line to incorporate a rigid piece of steel with some fins that allows for some cooling. I'm not sure how much cooling it actually accomplishes, but anyway, there it is. And how you install it is that you tap into the power steering lines way back here. I'd recommend you also install a magnifying filter. And if any of you were wondering what these 2 lines are, earlier in the video, those are the lines to and from the cooler. So I've cut into the return line, sent the return line all the way down in front of the radiator, and then all the way back into the return line and into the reservoir. Anyway, as I said, hope this helps someone out there. Thanks.